Hello, hello. Oh, and I think the sound is working too. Excellent. Um, Great. Hello, hello. Oh, and I think the sound is working too. Excellent. Um, okay. I was waiting to make sure that everything was live and all set on my end. I like to do a little live test um, in the live page on my website to make sure that I'm hearing and seeing what you guys are hearing and seeing. So, welcome to the Breathing for Wellbeing workshop. My name is Christy Tending. You're on. Yes. Good morning, Carrie Jean. It is probably very early where you are, but I am thrilled that you are here. Um, I'm so psyched to be here today. This is our very first workshop of the year, which feels really exciting and kind of monumental because I think a year ago I wasn't even doing these that often. So today is really a testament to what can happen in a year, the power of time and experience and all of those magical things. So I'm Christy Tending. You're likely finding me at christytending.com, where I make all sorts of magical healing and self-care resources. Um, I'm really excited about today's workshop because this is one of my favorite things to nerd out about in my own practice. And in fact, in the last few months, I've actually gotten a lot of new perspective and new insight and new kind of detail that I'm finding in my own practice. So today is really kind of taking it super back to basics. When I taught this workshop in the past. I've taught a variation on this workshop a couple of times before. I feel like when I taught this workshop in the past, I like really rushed ahead into some of the more advanced practices. And what I'm finding in my practice these days is really the value and beauty and potency in getting back to basics and starting with the fundamentals and reconnecting with those. So I'm really excited to share what I've been learning in my own practice about this work. Breathing has been at the cornerstone of my practice for maybe 10 years now. I started learning these practices as a yogi and in my yoga teacher training, and started teaching them in my yoga classes. And then when I moved away from teaching public yoga classes, I knew that this was like a piece of work that I really wanted to offer in this new format in which I'm offering things these days. So I'm very excited about that. My cat Harriet is asleep on the couch at the other end, which again is kind of a testament to time and a year, because now I get to work from home and I get to work with my cats every day. So life is really magical. Obviously, I'm in an awesome mood today. I'm super jazzed to like nerd out and connect with you all. As you are popping in and joining us, make sure to introduce yourselves in the chat, and tell us who you are, where you're from, um, maybe one thing you're really excited about today, maybe how the new year is going for you so far. Um, in my kind of social media sphere, I saw a lot of like good riddance 2016. So I'm hoping that 2017 is treating you really well and really gently so far. And yeah, it's only been like 5 days, and already this year is feeling really good to me. I'm feeling really well, and today in particular, I'm feeling really strong and very vibrant, and I'm really excited to kind of hustle out some things this year in preparation of some big life changes. Not use your wheelchair for a week now. That is monumental, because I know that that's been a big thing for you, Carrie Jean. So way to go. That like fills my heart with so much joy. So as we're narrowing in on it being 1:00 in California, which is when I sort of said that we would get started, I just wanted to briefly introduce myself again, and then I'm going to take us into the content for today. So my name is Christy. I go by Christy Tending online. My full last name, it's not a big like secret or anything. It's Tenery Spalding. My husband and I both changed our names 3 years ago when we got married, and then when we went to set up email addresses for ourselves, we were like, this is really long. So we became the Tendings. If you read my little e-letter this week that I sent out to all my subscribers, this week was the week that I made the announcement that Mr. Tending and I are having a baby in April. So I'm in particular really excited to be offering as many of these workshops as possible, and to be connecting with you, with as many of you as possible, before I go on my maternity leave in April. So this is sort of like the kickoff of my like big workshop digital tour. And I chose this as the first workshop of the year just because it is one of the topics that lights me up the most. I feel like when I teach this work, I just get this kind of like infectious attitude, and everybody else gets psyched too. So wanted to pass some of that along to you. And thank you very much for the congratulations. It is big, exciting news. Hi, Kim. Focused on mindfulness for 2017. You are so in the right place. If you were focused on mindfulness for 2017, because we're going to talk a lot about mindfulness and how that connects with breath. And I'm really happy that you're here too. Go team. All right. It is now 1:00 in California. So I'm going to take us into the workshop. And breathing for well-being. Really, this is about using the breath as a vehicle for self-healing, self-discovery, and more joy, more calm, more mindfulness, more awesomeness. So this is one of the many live self-care workshops that I teach. I try to teach at least once a month. This month I'm teaching 3 times, so we actually have a couple more meditation-focused workshops coming up later this month. But today we're really going to focus on breathing. And what I want you to know is that you already have your greatest self-care tool. There is very little that I always say this, there's very little you can learn from me that does not already exist somewhere in your consciousness, somewhere in your own expertise and your own experience with your own body. And you already have the greatest self-care tool you could ever use. And spoiler alert, given the topic of this workshop, it is your breath. And so before we dive in, for this workshop, you're going to want to find yourself a distraction-free space, a comfortable seat, any sacred objects that you want around you. I like to treat these workshops a little bit as though I'm teaching a retreat, or I'm teaching a public yoga class or a public meditation class. So I try to look nice. I gather my little magical objects around me. I really try to set this up as sacred a space as possible. Um, and then I also really ask you to bring your curiosity and your courage today. So ask your questions in the chat. Let me know what you think about things. Speak up. This is really for you. This is not a vanity exercise so that I get to talk for an hour and change. That would be way less fun. So definitely let me know if you want anything clarified, if you have any questions at all. I'm really here in service to you. So let's back up. Who am I? If this is your very first workshop connecting with me, again, I'm Christy Tending. I am a self-care mentor, an activist, and a healer. I see these roles as being really intertwined. Very briefly, my mission in this world is to build a more compassionate world for us all to live in. And I do this by through my own activism as a climate justice activist, as a healer, and then mentoring other people who are healers, change makers, or who are simply interested in this more compassionate world, and helping them develop amazing self-care. I mentioned this before some of you hopped on, but I discovered these breathing practices that we're going to talk about today in my yoga teacher training through my apprenticeship many years ago. And I have to say, of all of the things that I've learned, it's one of the practices, this set of practices is one of the tools that really pays dividends in my practice every single day, because I rely on the lessons of my breath and these practices on a literal daily basis. So I want you to know that whoever you are, however you're showing up, that you're in the right place today. We are not here to judge or to aim for perfection, but rather to be in community and in communion. And so if you are seeking more mindfulness, if you are seeking more joy, and if you're simply seeking that more compassionate world, you're in the right place. And hi, either Tara or Tara, I never know, but welcome. I'm really, really glad that you're here. That is awesome. You do awesome work in the world. I'm so excited that you're here. So before we begin, and really dive into the material that we're here to cover today, I want you to take a moment with yourself, with your own heart, to set a really clear intention for yourself. How do you want to show up in this space for the next hour or so? This is something that I aim to do at the beginning of each workshop because it's part of my own process. And I think that before diving into any kind of self-care practice or any kind of mindfulness practice or any type of space where you are in communion with yourself, it's important to kind of set that tone. The quality of attention that you want to bring to whatever activity it is that you are about to engage in. So I always approach my teaching in these workshops from a place of immense gratitude for those of you who are here and showing up, and creating this beautiful energetic space. So I'm showing up in gratitude, and I'm also showing up in deep curiosity, because so often the questions that I get on these workshops, the interactions that I have, I always learn something myself. So staying in that space of curiosity is really helpful for me. So I invite you to set an intention for this next short amount of time that we have together. And I invite you to do this before engaging in any kind of self-care practice, grounding yourself in why it is that you're showing up for self-care, what it is that you're seeking, and keeping that intention in your heart as you move forward. So while we're in this sort of liminal mindfulness space, check in with yourself. How does your breath feel today? Are there any particular qualities to it that stick out? Is it sort of shallow and thready? Is it really deep and robust? Do you, like me, perhaps have the lingering bits of a cold? You can probably hear it in my voice. I've been a little bit under the weather. I've had a little bit of a suppressed immune system, and which makes it more difficult for me to get over colds. So just checking in. How does your breath feel today? And noticing, not trying to change that breath at all, but simply being present with it. And knowing that your breath is at the core of your well-being. In a literal sense, we don't survive without our breath. But it also has this incredible capacity for transformation on a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual level. Our breath really can infuse us with a sense of our own well-being. Um, and the amazing thing is that you are already an expert, whether you know it or not, whether you know the names of the practices, whether you know the exact sequence of how yogic breathing practices work, you're already an expert in your own breath. And so what I'm offering today is some of my experience, some of the practices that have worked for me. But truly, I will never know your breath as intimately as you already do, even before you begin this as a practice. So in this workshop, we're going to talk about the mechanics of breathing for luminous health, inside and out. So this is an inner practice and an outer practice. We're going to cover practices so that you can really fill your self-care toolbox with incredibly easy and easeful breathing practices so that you can bring self-care into any situation. Now, these practices that we're going to do today are going to be somewhat deceptively simple, and yet their beauty is in their simplicity and the fact that you can be doing these practices in any moment, without anyone knowing, which is one of my favorite things, because it means that you can breathe in the middle of meetings, on public transportation, when you're walking down the street, in the middle of a difficult conversation, and bring yourself back into that space of self-care without having to take yourself out of the situation. Which means that you can transform your inner state without having to transform your outer circumstance. We're also going to talk about the intuitiveness of these practices and how we expand our capacity for intuitive self-healing. And I say here so that you can find more calm, sweeter sleep, greater joy. But really, when you develop this understanding of yourself as an intuitive self-healer, you find sort of limitless capacity for not only these things, but the ability to be mindful and in relationship with yourself. So definitely stay till the end. I always do our live Q&A at the end, so keep popping any questions you have in the chat, and I will cover all of them at the end. I also have some beautiful bonuses for you today. I'm doing a live group coaching call coming up, and so you'll have the chance to snag that, a spot in that. And then I'm also going to talk about practices that I love most for sleep, for air travel, for stress, and really the lessons that I've learned the last few months with breathing. Because breathing has really been an essential piece of my self-care, particularly since I've been pregnant. I can't always do a full yoga practice these days. I don't have the energy or the interest sometimes. So not all of my self-care practices are applicable anymore, but breathing is one that I've really gotten really close to. So I'm going to talk at the very end about my own practice, how these breathing practices are kind of evolving for me in my own practice. So why breathing? Why am I teaching this stress relief in early pregnancy? I will totally talk about that because I have a couple of stories. Yeah, 100%. I was very stressed at the beginning of my pregnancy. So we'll talk about that. Why breathing? Okay. Why am I even teaching this workshop? Why are we even talking about breathing? Because it seems pretty basic. For me, it gets me into a flow. And it's almost like this little funnel. It brings me back into present moment awareness, which gets me back into my body. It has me fully embodied wherever, whenever I find myself. And this leads to greater resilience. So it's a funnel, but it also works a little bit like a loop. It's this kind of feedback loop where I use my breath to cultivate present moment awareness. I get myself back into my body. I cultivate this resilience, this ability to be flexible and to flow in any situation. And that resilience leads me to a greater capacity for present moment awareness. So it all flows back into itself. And I access this, for me personally, first and foremost through my breath. Any other practice, and this includes like my meditation practice, my yoga practice, any other practice I have sort of follows my breath. And this is the number one tool that I have for kind of getting into this funnel, and the ultimate goal being a greater sense of resilience. So again, notice your breath right now. Without doing anything to shift the breath or change anything about it, just notice your breath right now. And gather as many details as possible. If you have a journal or a notebook, you might just want to brainstorm a little bit, some adjectives that come to mind. What are the qualities that you're experiencing in your breath? This right here is kind of your baseline. And already, this is probably a little bit more relaxed than your baseline because you're showing up here and you've set your intention and you're kind of clarifying some things. But before we begin doing the practices, I want you to set a baseline for yourself of what your breath usually feels like. So breathing, I made this slide kind of as a joke, but it's kind of not a joke. Breathing is really legit. And I want to talk about why I teach these practices the way that I do, because they're not just feel-good practices. They have real backing. There's real legitimate evidence that this works. And so let's talk about that for a moment. Now that you have your kind of baseline breath, and as I'm talking throughout this workshop, you should feel free to really be checking in with your breath and feeling what that's like for you and how it shifts. So a study at UCSF, which is the University of California at San Francisco, which is a medical school, and truly an excellent one. A study asked the question, can yogic breathing practices help to address some of the side effects of chemotherapy for cancer patients? Now, this was a study that my mentor, the woman with whom I apprenticed for many years, she was the facilitator for this study. So she wasn't the researcher, but she was the one who was leading these yogic breathing practices. And the results, unsurprisingly, of this study demonstrated overwhelmingly that yogic breathing practices, some of which are like ones we're going to do today, decreased instances and severity of depression, anxiety, and insomnia for cancer patients undergoing chemotherapy treatment. This means, like, in plain speak, this means that cancer patients who are undergoing chemo felt more hopeful, more joyful, less stressed, and enjoyed better sleep than those who did not practice these breathing exercises. And on a personal level, I just want to say that these practices are the same ones that I taught to my own mom when she was undergoing chemotherapy and cancer treatment 6 years ago. My mom, breathing practices or no, she is still alive, so I don't want anybody to feel like weird or sad. But she really enjoyed doing these practices, and it really did give her a much greater sense of calm when she was feeling anxious. It helped her to ease herself back to sleep in the middle of the night when she would wake up. It really helped her to anchor herself in a time when she felt otherwise very out of control, which is not an uncommon experience for people who are undergoing chemotherapy treatment. So now, obviously, this is a really extreme example of how we can use these practices, but I think it illustrates beautifully what their power is. So let's now talk about and break apart a bit the mechanics of breathing well, because there are some best practices here. We all technically know how to breathe. We do it all day long, whether we're thinking about it or not. And yet, by engaging some of these mechanics and some of these best practices, we can really amplify the efficacy of our breath, particularly in these difficult moments. So this isn't necessarily something you need to be worried about or hyper aware of in your unconscious moments, but in difficult moments when you are looking for that bit of self-care, these are some of the best practices you'll want to keep in mind. So you want to breathe in and out through the nose. This is something that comes from the yoga tradition. I know that other body-based practices have other breathing patterns. I know that in Pilates, you breathe out through the mouth, which after 15 years of yoga, I just find very confusing. So for our purposes today, you'll breathe in and out through the nose. On the inhale, the belly expands. And I have to laugh because my belly is already expanding. And that's fine. But so on the inhale, you want the belly and the rib cage and sort of the whole torso basket to be expanding as the lungs expand and fill with air. Now, similarly, on the exhale, the belly contracts, the rib cage pulls in, the whole torso sort of contracts a little bit. And it might not be a big, gross movement. It might be sort of small and subtle. But you are engaging, to some extent, abdominal muscles and really pulling in as the lungs release the air. Now, to note, because I've been teaching this long enough that I know, and one of the tough parts about this workshop is that I can't see all of you, but the opposite of this can feel very natural. The opposite being to contract on the inhale and to expand on the exhale, because the exhale is a relaxation. And yet, we want to make sure that we're expanding the belly on the inhale and contracting it on the exhale, because this is consistent with how the diaphragm is moving. The diaphragm is that sort of arch-shaped muscle underneath the lungs, and this is more consistent with how the diaphragm is actually moving, with the mechanics of the diaphragm. So the last thing that I want to say about the mechanics of breathing is that this is like a no drama zone. So if at any moment you feel like you're struggling for breath, that it feels uncomfortable, that you're either gasping in or letting out big sighs of air, um, I invite you to come back to your natural, neutral, easeful breath and take a few breaths there before you go back into the practice, because none of these practices should feel more stressful. There shouldn't be any drama or anxiety around any of this. Um, Belly breathing to me feels like breathing out through the mouth for you, Christy. Yeah, it can feel really strange at first if it's not what you're used to. Um, I just invite you to experiment with it. That's all I'll say. No pressure. Um, so again, these principles of really vibrant breath. In and out through the nose. Inhale, belly expands. Exhale, belly contracts. And keeping it like a drama-free zone. Keeping it chill, because these practices are definitely not designed to add more stress. They're designed to relieve some of it. So, um, stay kind with yourself as ever. So now let's practice for a moment. So find a comfortable seat and close your eyes and place your hands on your belly. And this will help you to bring some of that mindfulness to your belly as it moves in and out. And just breathe easily in and out through the nose, keeping the eyes closed, keeping the breath slow and easeful and soft. Inhaling, belly expands. Exhaling, belly contracts. And simply watching the breath, observing it as it comes in and out, as though you were watching a wave lapping against the shore and then moving out into the ocean once again. And staying curious and present here with the breath. And at the conclusion of the next exhale, letting the eyes float open. And maybe if you have a notebook or a journal, jotting down a little bit about how did that feel? What was that experience like, simply watching the breath come and go? And how did it differ from your experience of your baseline breath? And this is a pretty unscientific investigation that we're doing here, but that is exactly what we're doing. We're gathering information and we're investigating what changes things. How does that feel? Modifying it and then seeing how that feels. So quickly, I wanted to just touch on a couple of other elements of breathing so that you have this in your mind as we move forward. So according to yoga and Ayurveda, which is Indian traditional medicine, in the same way that the Chinese have their own system of traditional medicine, India has its own. It's often connected to yoga. So according to those systems, the inhale energizes us and the exhale calms us. And the little space in between holds rest and clarity and grace. And so we're going to experiment today with each of these elements, but knowing their kind of overarching qualities can be useful. So let's practice now. Finding your seat and closing your eyes and locating the breath again. This time, focusing your attention on the exhale. And you might, at first, simply pay closer attention to the exhale. If you like, you could begin extending the exhale so that it's slightly longer than the inhale. Not much longer, and certainly not to the point where you feel like you're puffing out air or running out of breath, but just so that it's slightly longer than the inhale. So perhaps you inhale for 2 or 3 counts, and then you exhale for 3 or 4 counts. Releasing the breath fully and bringing that attention to the exhale and letting it be as full as possible. And at the end of your next full exhale, letting the breath come back to normal, releasing the pattern of the longer exhale, and then eventually letting the eyes float open. And now, how did that feel? Making any notes for yourself, any observations that you had during that practice, where we let the exhale be a little bit longer than the inhale. And because the exhale is connected with this greater sense of calm, this may be an excellent practice for you to investigate to relieve some stress. It's super simple. It doesn't require a whole lot of efforting or specific techniques, and so it can be a really excellent practice for that. So let's add another layer now. So closing your eyes again, locating your breath, and this time bringing the attention to the little pause between the inhale and exhale. And before you do that, you could either let your inhale and exhale be easeful, no change. You could let the exhale be a little bit longer than the inhale, again, if that practice felt good for you before. And you could also simply practice letting the inhale and exhale be exactly the same length. It doesn't really matter what you choose, but choose a practice that feels good for you. And then focusing on that little gap between the inhale and the exhale, the little pause between the exhale and the inhale. At first, it feels nearly imperceptible. It's just that little flip where one side of the breath becomes the other, where the inhale becomes the exhale, and then the exhale becomes the inhale. You might hold the breath either in or out for a quick moment to emphasize that pause. But letting that be the point of focus for your mind. Noticing the quality of the pause as one breath becomes the next. And then at the conclusion of the next exhale, you'll let the breath become soft and neutral again. And then you'll let the eyes float open. And making any notes for yourself about what you found in that pause. I actually had left part of this little slideshow blank until I had time to actually sit down and find what was in that pause for me, which is where I found the words rest and clarity and grace. And you might find completely different words. But that's part of what we're doing, is developing this vocabulary for ourselves. So what did you find in the pause? Making any notes or using any adjectives in your journal to describe it? So our intuition is really the key to vibrant well-being. Our intuition is so closely bound up in our breath, in our mindfulness, in our self-healing capacity. And I will say over and over again that you yourself are the expert in your own experience. And so that is step number one to developing this vibrancy of well-being. I don't say this lightly. I am somebody who has worked with chronic pain most of her life, who has worked through mental health struggles, who is now pregnant and doesn't feel well all the time. But I really believe that my intuition is the key to keeping myself well and vibrant. And our breath is the tool. It's the key that gives us easy access to that inner knowing. Because even when I feel overwhelmed or I'm in that state of not feeling well, that leads me to want to tune out, when I connect with my breath, it immediately tethers me back to that inner knowing, that kind of unmistakable wisdom that I already have from years of simply living in my own body. So how do we hone our intuition? And again, this goes back to our intention. What do you want your life to be? How do you want to show up for it? What is the tone that you are looking to cultivate as you embody yourself? So in honing our intuition, I have a couple of kind of keywords that I like to bear in mind when I talk about honing intuition, because intuition can feel like a really big thing. It can feel like a big, scary, nebulous thing that maybe other people have, and you aren't sure what your intuition is saying, and that feels scary, and therefore it's not for you. So obviously I disagree with that assessment of things, but I also think that intuition is simply a result of, and I've said these words a lot so far in this workshop, and that's been on purpose because I want you to really know them in this context, but we investigate. What is my breath like now? How does my body feel today? What is my present moment experience? And then we experiment. What happens when I do this kind of breathing practice? How is that different from how I feel when I do this other kind of breathing practice? This middle piece is perhaps the most difficult, and that is trusting the information that comes to us through our intuition. So often we are sold this notion that your intuition is not to be trusted, and I couldn't believe the opposite more strongly. But when we investigate, when we experiment, when we experience, when we stay present with ourselves, we begin to hear that inner knowing, that intuition, so strongly. It becomes so real and lived that we begin to trust it. So I think that trust, and not just honing your intuition, but believing your intuition, is one of the keys here. And then you practice. And you investigate some more, and you experiment some more, and you take tiny baby steps. So honing your intuition is not I have the solution for you in 10 days kind of issue. Honing your intuition is a lifelong, like, love affair, for lack of a less cheesy phrase. Um, and so there's no reason to rush into it. We take little baby steps. We build this trust slowly. And over time, it becomes more and more reliable for us. You are already a trustworthy expert in your own experience and needs. And you can choose to believe what your intuition is telling you. The times, the moments of regret that I have in my life are very few and far between. I don't tend to spend a whole lot of time on regret. But my moments of regret are when I don't trust my intuition and what it is telling me and go against it. That is when things come off the rails. That is when the wheels come off the bus. That is when bad things happen in the world of me. So choosing to believe what your intuition is telling you is such a powerful gift. I just can't even tell you. So let's practice this now. So find your comfortable seat again. If you're in a chair, I recommend feet flat on the floor, if you can. Hands either on the belly or in the lap. Closing your eyes and locating that breath once again. And perhaps you just observe the breath. Perhaps you follow the inhale and exhale in your mind. Perhaps you lengthen that exhale again. Or perhaps you let the inhale and exhale be the same length. It's up to you which of these practices you choose. But this time, we'll add a layer to this where I want you to begin collecting data about your experience. So it's not just a concentration practice where you're laser focused on the inhale and exhale, but start to fill in as much detail as possible about the experience. The temperature of the breath as it moves across your nostrils, any sounds that the breath makes. You might notice any smells around you if there are any. Notice any places of stuckness or tension in the body, any places in the body where that place is calling your attention away from the breath. And notice it, and then let it go. Gathering as many pieces of information as you can, even just in this simple moment of breathing in and breathing out. involving every sense and being as granular and specific as possible about the data that you're collecting. And then at the conclusion of the next exhale, let the eyes float open. And then making some notes for yourself about how that felt. Any particular noticings that you came across on your investigative journey. Any new pieces of information that you gathered about your own experience. This is ultimately how we hone our intuition, by being as present as possible with ourselves, potentially using our breath to anchor ourselves to this moment, and gathering every shred of specific lived experience that we can. And noticing what feels good, what feels not so good. So, where to put your practice? Breathing can seem kind of like an esoteric practice, but there are some specific places where I like to make sure that I'm breathing really mindfully. Um, so, in between meetings and appointments, if you happen to have work where you are sort of rushing from one thing to the next, or things feel a little bit back to back for you, um, putting a little bit of breathing practice in between those things, it could be for 15, 30, 60 seconds. But putting a little bit of breathing space, literally, in between some of those engagements. Um, I use my breathing practice as a place to set an intention or to ground myself before something. So often, if I am going into a meeting, I will close my eyes. Or if I'm in public and it would be really obvious, then I keep my eyes open. But I just take a few moments to connect with my breath, to set my intention, to feel my grounding a little bit. At the beginning or end of the day, I'm going to talk about sleep and kind of end of the day and how I integrate that into my practice at the end to answer your question about early pregnancy and stress, but also in that phase where I'm going to talk about my own practice as part of your travel routine. If you are sitting on a bus or on a road trip or you are on an airplane, I imagine you have a fair amount of time. I cannot more highly recommend closing your eyes and doing a bit of breathing practice. It'll calm that queasy stomach. It will relax your nervous system. So good. Before or after meals, and then also pairing it with any other healing art. Meditation and yoga are kind of obvious choices. But I also like to integrate my breathing practice when I'm knitting or when I'm painting. Or even if I'm outside in nature, when I'm going for hikes or sitting among the redwoods, I like to integrate my breathing practice there. Again, take baby steps, experiment. There's no one right way. The important part of this whole thing is that you find a way of breathing that really works for you and that serves you. And really, again, our intuition is the key to vibrant well-being. This intuition, this ability to be present and aware within ourselves and to trust our own inner knowing is what takes us into that state of well-being, regardless of external circumstance. And again, I've seen this in my own life. I've seen my own ability to be in a state of healing, even when my pain levels are very intense. I've seen my mom going through chemotherapy treatment with rosy cheeks because she's doing these breathing practices and she's connecting with that inner knowing, herself, her breath, her vibrancy, regardless of those external circumstances. So on a physical level, how does this promote healing? We've talked a lot about the inner state and our intuition and our inner realm. But on a physical level, what does this have to do with anything? Breathing practices like the ones we've tried today, and I go much deeper into breathing practices with much more advanced practices in my breathing course. But the ones that we've tried today activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system is really how, on a physiological level, all of this ends up sort of taking effect. So the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system promotes, among other things, digestion, immune function, cellular healing, including brain function, and the production of calming hormones in the brain. So by activating the parasympathetic nervous system, we're really giving our bodies a chance to heal well, and to do their own to activate their own innate healing abilities rather than requiring external intervention. So this is known as the rest and digest response. Now, the sympathetic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that it insists on the flight or fight response, which actually depresses all of these things here. It depresses digestion, immune function, healing, and of course these calming hormones. So that's known as the flight or fight response. This is known as the rest and digest response. It's what lets us go to sleep. It's what lets us digest our food and absorb all of those nutrients. So even if you don't feel like you're quote unquote doing, your body is hard at work healing itself. This has been another important lesson for me this last few months. Even when I'm sitting on the couch, my body is doing an incredible amount of work. And activating that parasympathetic nervous system, easing stress, connecting with my breath, staying in a mindful, intuitive space is really what lets my body do all of the incredible healing and generative work that it's doing right now. So good breathing, again, is truly the cornerstone of well-being. It allows us to tap into our intuition, to cultivate healing on a physical level, and perhaps most importantly, develop deep respect and love for our body's unique capacities. So I want you to take a few more deep, easeful breaths, observing the quality and the tone of your breath. What is the experience of your breath now? Now that you've been breathing and present with yourself for close to an hour now, what is the experience of that breath now? What are its qualities? What is its tone? And keep asking yourself that question as you move forward. So if you really want to breathe into your well-being this year, I am offering a New Year bundle, which includes my course, Breathing Wellness, where we go into way more breathing practices. We go super in-depth on sort of the cause and effect of breathing practices, how we can use these breathing practices in different moments in our lives, as well as Hela Metta, which is my audio meditation program. which is a meditation program to cultivate loving kindness meditation, which is my very favorite. So what this bundle does is it creates this space and this vocabulary to deepen into breathing and meditation for lifelong practice of mindfulness and intuitive healing. It builds this sense of interior trust so you can experience self-care in any moment with only your breath and, of course, your sweetheart. So what you get are, with this bundle, are my courses, Breathing Wellness and Hella Metta. These are both delivered digitally, and they really, I think, together, immersive experience in mindfulness and wholehearted well-being. So I really made this for people who are craving deep practice, but who don't have the time or the money or the ability to go on a long, expensive retreat. These are sort of designed to be self-retreat, home retreat practices, so that you can have that kind of immersive experience of the retreat without the same kind of enormous commitment that a retreat can require. So in Breathing Wellness, you get 11 audio breathing practices from beginner to super advanced. All of these come from yogic breathing practices for well-being in all moments. You get a practice journal to track your experience. You get written guides for each practice, as well as 2 mini books to support your practice. So you can load the audio practices onto your iPod or your iPhone or wherever you listen to stuff. You can keep your written instructions on your Kindle or your iPad, and really take these practices with you wherever you go. And then in Hella Metta, it's a step-by-step program with more than 20 audio meditations. There are now 2 ebooks that come with this course. And coming soon, I'm also delivering 2 new videos to the course so that you can dive deeper into self-love and self-healing through meditation. Metta practice, loving kindness practice, is something that has been a huge part of my life, and I'm actually going on retreat on Monday for 8 days to dive even deeper into my metta practice. And once I'm back, I'm going to be making the course like even more robust and amazing. But of course, if you buy it through here, you get all the extras just at a much different price. You'll also receive a free spot in my upcoming group coaching call for meditation and breathing. This is happening in February. It's a full hour where I kind of do even more advanced practices, answer all of your questions. We'll go through the course materials kind of step by step with everybody to make sure that everybody's feeling really solid, and just support you in your journey. So you'll have plenty of time between now and then to work through course materials so you can really come prepared to take your practice to the next level. And of course, there's going to be like bonuses and worksheets and like yummy surprises for anybody who is getting in on the coaching call. And if you can't make the call live, there will absolutely be a recording. And you can listen to it whenever you want, or you can listen to it for a second time. So plus you get all of these bonuses, resource guides, playlists, desktop wallpapers, all sorts of beautiful extras so that you can really feel well supported and so that your course experiences can feel really holistic. I love creating these bonuses, and my forever goal is to over deliver like crazy. So here's what some of my past students say. This is Sarah, who is has a master's in public health. She's a graduate nursing student, and she teaches these practices that I offer inside this course. She uses them not only for herself as a graduate nursing student, but she also teaches these practices to her patients, which is a huge blessing and a huge gift, to know that people are taking these things out into the world in that way. This is Emily, who is an incredible artist. She used Hella Metta as really a guide for herself when she was visiting a sick family member. And in deepening her self-compassion and her loving feelings toward her whole family during what was a very difficult time. So one quick note, which is that this is in fact the last week to get Breathing Wellness. And I wanted to let you know the price for Hella Metta, because I'm adding all of these extras, is going up at the end of the month. So not only is this an exclusive and really great bundle, but these courses are not going to be available, or they won't be available at this price pretty much ever again. So now's the time to hop on it. So here's everything you get. You get the Hella Metta course, you get the Breathing Wellness course, you get this exclusive bonus group coaching call with me, and you get all of these beautiful bonuses. I love adding new bonuses all the time. And the other piece to know about this work is that you have access to all of these materials forever. And whenever I add new materials, you're automatically upgraded. So while you're getting it at the lower price now, you will always have access to the full course as they kind of ripen and develop. So the bundle is valued at over $300. Your investment is only $97, this is how I aim to do it, you guys. For people who show up to my workshops, I try to deliver kind of like 3-to-1, 4-to-1 value. And so I also really believe in keeping my work as accessible as possible, which is why I do these bundles, which is why I do these workshops. So other past students, this is Esme, who's actually just featured on my blog this week in my Collective Care series. She said on Twitter, so sweet, I'm taking this course and it actually helped me through a panic attack this morning. So this work helps people in the real world, which is always the goal, right? And this is Ashley, who is herself an incredible leader and healer. The word that comes to mind when I think about Christy is sacred. Her vision for self-care is contagious, and the way she holds space for you is precious. Spending time with her is undoubtedly transformation. So you hit the big yellow button, select Get the Bundle Now. You pay via secure checkout page, you get your first course materials right away, and then the Hella Metta course begins right away, and you will receive within the next 24 hours the access code for the full Breathing Wellness course. So this is what the secure checkout looks like. Again, this is everything you get. You get the Breathing Wellness course, you get the Hella Metta course, you get, in about a month or so, we're going to gather for this bonus group coaching call where we dive super deep and get even more advanced with the Breathing Wellness and Hella Metta work. And then you get all of the beautiful bonuses that I lovingly made for you. Okay, so now is the time for questions. Hello, there's my face again. Woohoo! So I saw a question earlier about stress relief in early pregnancy. So I felt very stressed at the beginning of my pregnancy. I actually got pregnant right as we were moving house. And 2 weeks after we moved house, we went to Europe for 2 weeks. So I was newly pregnant, had just moved, and was completely jet lagged. And the practice that I used the most for this time in my pregnancy, and I still continue to use it, especially when I have difficulty sleeping, is the even inhale and exhale practice, where the inhale is the same length as the exhale. Many of the practices, I don't want to say many, some of the practices in yoga are contraindicated for pregnancy. Many are just fine. Alternate nostril breathing, even inhale and exhale, deep 3-part breath. Most of the practices that you'll find in breathing wellness are completely wonderful for pregnancy. My very favorite was the even inhale and exhale. I found that it really kind of evened out my brain and sort of took some of the sharp edges off of the situation in a way that allowed me to come back to the present moment. It let me sleep, which were two of the most important things to me at that point. I was kind of struggling with everything that was going on, and then adding pregnancy on top of that was definitely stressful. And I luckily did not have a whole lot of nausea, but there are definitely practices inside the course that are awesome for that. We didn't cover a whole lot of those today. The other one that I would add for stress relief for early pregnancy would be that extension of the exhale, as long as it feels comfortable. That's really the name of the game when it comes to breathing practices for pregnancy, and most approaches to prenatal self-care, including prenatal yoga, is do what feels good, follow your intuition, develop that, go where that takes you. Your body is wise, even if you've never been pregnant before. Like, I've never been pregnant before. My body knows what to do. My body knows what's up. We have a very trusting relationship, my body and I. So, yeah. That, I hope that answered your question about stress in early pregnancy. But really, that even exhale and inhale practice was a lifesaver. It was a game changer. And I also just wanted to talk kind of about the practices that I really love. As I mentioned, this exhale and inhale have become the even exhale and inhale practice has become an essential part of my practice on an ongoing basis. And I continue to be amazed by the subtlety of it and the transformative nature of it. And it's one that feels incredibly simple, but continues to be amazing and so good. So that's one of the practices that I really love, especially for things like sleep and greater calm. The other practice that I love for creating a sense of calm in myself is the practice. I believe I included it as a link in your email confirmation for this workshop. But it's alternate nostril breathing. It's an amazing practice for calm and for sleep, and for really feeling deeply well, and again, sort of evening out some of those rough edges. So I definitely urge you to check that out, and enjoy that. I am not seeing any more questions. If you do have questions, pop them in. And all right, I think that's it. It is now after 2:00, so I've been chatting for a while, so I'm gonna respect your time and let you go. one more quick note about the bundle. It is only available until tomorrow at 2 p.m. It's really such a good deal that I'm only keeping it up for about 24 hours. So if you are interested in really diving into breathing wellness, into Hella Metta, into more time with me, and really diving into these practices for mindfulness, for well-being in the new year, hop on that bundle. It's only $97. And you get both courses, the call with me, loads of bonuses, and forever access to the materials, including all of the upgrades that I'm about to make. The price of the bundle now is what Hella Metta is going to cost by itself in just a few weeks. So if that has been something that's been on your mind, now's the time to grab it while it's there. So thank you so much for being here. It's always an honor to serve you in this way. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. I hope you have a beautiful 2017. And I will chat with you soon. I'll see you soon. Take good care.